Imagine standing in a billionaire's kitchen at 6 in the morning, scrubbing cold marble floors on your hands and knees, when the woman who is about to marry the man you work for walks in and tells you that you are nothing, that you are worthless, that you are a disgusting piece of trash who will never amount to anything in this lifetime. She tells you that you smell like poverty, that you don't deserve to breathe the same air as her, and that she will personally make sure you are thrown out on the street like garbage. Now imagine that every single poisonous word dripping from her cruel mouth was being heard, live, by the billionaire himself, through an intercom system she had absolutely no idea existed. What this billionaire does next to protect a hard-working, innocent maid and completely destroy his own fiancée's empire of lies will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? Let's go. The Ashford estate sat on 12 acres of manicured land outside Greenwich, Connecticut. It was a monument to extreme wealth, with towering marble columns, imported Italian fountains, and a driveway long enough to lose sight of the iron gates from the front door. Dominic Ashford, 41 years old, was the man who owned it all. He had built a financial empire from nothing, turning a small investment firm into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse through discipline, intelligence, and an almost supernatural ability to read people. He was calm, measured, and deeply private. He rarely raised his voice. He never made decisions based on emotion. His fiancée, Victoria Langston, was the opposite. Victoria was stunningly beautiful, 33 years old, with sharp cheekbones, designer clothes draped over every inch of her body, and an ego the size of the mansion she lived in. She had been engaged to Dominic for 14 months, and in that time, she had slowly transformed the estate into her personal kingdom, where every staff member existed solely to serve her growing list of demands. And then there was Elena. Elena Campos was a 26-year-old woman who had worked as the head housekeeper at the Ashford estate for the past 10 months. She was quiet, hardworking, and unfailingly polite. She had moved to Connecticut from a small town in New Mexico to support her younger brother, who was battling a serious illness. Every dollar Elena earned went straight to his medical bills. She never complained. She never called in sick. She simply worked. But tonight, everything was about to change, because Victoria Langston had decided that Elena Campos needed to be broken. It started on a Tuesday evening, just after 7 o'clock. Dominic was away on a business trip in Chicago, or at least that is what Victoria believed. She had watched his black SUV pull out of the driveway that morning, and the moment those taillights disappeared behind the iron gates, her entire demeanor shifted. Victoria had always been careful around Dominic. She smiled at the staff when he was watching. She used polite words and soft tones whenever he was within earshot. But the second Dominic left the property, a different woman emerged. A cruel, vicious, power-drunk woman who treated the household staff like insects beneath her designer heels. Elena was in the West Wing hallway, carefully polishing the antique mirror frames that lined the corridor. She had been working since 5 in the morning and her back ached. But she kept going because there were still 3 rooms left on her checklist before she could clock out. The sharp click of stilettos echoed down the hallway. Elena's stomach immediately tightened. She knew that sound. She knew exactly who was coming. Victoria appeared at the end of the corridor, holding a glass of red wine in one hand and her phone in the other. She stopped directly behind Elena and stared at her reflection in the mirror the young housekeeper was polishing. "You missed a spot," Victoria said coldly, pointing at the perfectly clean glass with a manicured fingernail. Elena looked at the mirror. There was no spot. The surface was flawless. But she had learned months ago that arguing with Victoria only made things worse. "Yes, ma'am. I will go over it again," Elena said quietly, spraying the glass once more and wiping it down with a fresh cloth. Victoria took a slow sip of her wine, watching Elena work with an expression of absolute disgust. "You know, Elena, I have been meaning to talk to you about something." Elena's hands slowed, but she did not turn around. "Yes, ma'am? I have been thinking about your position here," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "and I have come to a very clear conclusion. You do not belong in this house. You do not belong anywhere near this house. Honestly, I am not even sure how someone like you ended up working for a man like Dominic. Elena's jaw tightened. She kept her eyes fixed on the mirror, refusing to let the trembling in her hands become visible. Someone like me, ma'am? Elena asked carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria stepped closer, so close that Elena could smell the expensive perfume radiating off her skin. Yes, Elena. Someone like you. Someone worthless. The word hung in the air like poison. Worthless. Elena felt it hit her chest like a physical blow, but she did not react. She had survived worse things in her life than a rich woman's cruelty. She had buried her parents at 19. She had worked 3 jobs simultaneously to keep her brother alive. She was not going to break in front of Victoria Langston. But Victoria was not finished. She was just getting started. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Victoria continued, circling Elena slowly like a predator sizing up its prey. I see a girl from nowhere. A girl who scrubs toilets for a living. A girl who wears the same 3 outfits on rotation because she cannot afford anything better. You walk around this mansion like you actually matter, Elena. But let me make something very clear to you. You are furniture. You are less than furniture. At least the furniture in this house has value. Elena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Her fingers gripped the polishing cloth so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream. She wanted to turn around and tell this woman exactly what she thought of her. But she could not afford to lose this job. Her brother's next round of treatment was due in 2 weeks, and without her paycheck, there would be no treatment. Nothing to say? Victoria laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed through the empty corridor. Of course not, because deep down you know I am right. You are nothing, Elena. You were nothing before you came here, and you will be nothing long after I have you thrown out of this house. Which, by the way, is going to happen very soon. Elena swallowed hard and forced herself to speak. Ma'am, I have always done my work to the best of my ability. I have never given you any reason to speak to me this way. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. She stepped forward and knocked the spray bottle out of Elena's hand. It clattered loudly against the marble floor, the sound bouncing off the high ceilings. Do not talk back to me, Victoria hissed, her face inches from Elena's. I am going to be Mrs. Dominic Ashford in 3 months. That means this house, this staff, and your pathetic little paycheck all belong to me. And when I tell Dominic that you have been stealing from us, and trust me, you will not just lose your job. You will lose everything. Elena stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Victoria was not just being cruel anymore. She was making a direct threat. But what neither woman knew was that someone had already heard everything. Dominic Ashford had not gone to Chicago. His meeting had been canceled late the previous night due to a scheduling conflict, and instead of informing Victoria, he had decided to stay home and work quietly from his private study on the 3rd floor. It was a room Victoria rarely entered, tucked away behind a heavy oak door at the end of a narrow corridor lined with bookshelves. What Victoria did not know, and what no one on the staff knew either, was that Dominic had installed a state-of-the-art intercom monitoring system throughout the estate 8 months ago. It was not designed to spy on anyone. It was a security measure recommended by his private protection team after a string of high-profile burglaries had targeted wealthy estates across Connecticut. The system allowed Dominic to listen to audio feeds from every major room and corridor in the house through a discrete app on his personal tablet. He had never needed to use it. Until tonight. Dominic had been reviewing quarterly reports at his desk when a faint sound caught his attention through the tablet's open audio feed. He had left the West Wing corridor feed running in the background out of habit. At first, it was just the soft sound of spraying and wiping, Elena doing her evening rounds. Then he heard the click of stilettos. Then he heard Victoria's voice. He set down his pen and turned up the volume. For the next 6 minutes, Dominic Ashford sat in absolute silence, listening to every single word his fiancée said to Elena. He heard worthless. He heard furniture. He heard you are nothing. He heard Victoria threaten to fabricate a theft accusation to destroy a 26-year-old woman whose only crime was being poor and hardworking. Dominic's face did not change. His hands did not shake, but something behind his eyes shifted permanently. It was the same cold, calculating stillness that had made him one of the most feared negotiators in American finance. It was the look of a man who had just made a decision he would never reverse. He did not storm downstairs. He did not confront Victoria in a rage. That was not how Dominic Ashford operated. He believed that anger was a weapon best used cold, and right now, he needed to understand the full scope of what was happening under his own roof. He opened a second application on his tablet and pulled up the estate's archived audio logs from the past 3 months. If Victoria had done this tonight, she had done it before. And Dominic was going to find every single instance, catalog it, and build a case so airtight that Victoria Langston would never be able to deny, deflect, or escape what she had done. For the next 3 hours, Dominic sat in the dim glow of his study, scrolling through weeks of archived audio recordings. What he uncovered made his blood run cold. This was not an isolated incident. Victoria had been systematically tormenting Elena for months. On March 14th, Victoria had forced Elena to re-iron an entire closet of clothes that were already perfectly pressed, screaming at her for 2 straight hours until the young woman's hands were blistered from the steam. On March 22nd, Victoria had deliberately spilled an entire pot of coffee across the freshly mopped kitchen floor and demanded Elena clean it on her hands and knees while she stood over her, recording it on her phone and laughing. On April 3rd, Victoria had thrown Elena's packed lunch into the trash right in front of her, telling her that the smell of her cheap food was making the kitchen unbearable. Recording after recording, Dominic listened to his fiancée dismantle a young woman's dignity piece by piece. He heard Elena cry quietly in the supply closet on at least 4 separate occasions. He heard her whisper to herself, "Just get through today. Just get through today." He heard her call her brother late one evening from the staff break room, telling him everything was fine, that work was going great, and that his big sister was strong enough to handle anything. She was lying to protect him from the truth. She was enduring psychological torture in silence so that her younger brother could continue receiving the medical care that was keeping him alive. Dominic closed the tablet. He placed it face down on the desk and pressed both palms flat against the cold oak surface. He stared at the wall in front of him for a very long time. He had shared a bed with this woman for nearly 2 years. He had given her access to his home, his life, and his trust. He had introduced her to his family. He had placed a $200,000 engagement ring on her finger and promised her a future. And the entire time, she had been hiding a monster behind that beautiful face. But Dominic did not let the betrayal consume him. He channeled it. He picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his personal attorney, instructing him to begin preparing the legal documentation required to dissolve the engagement and remove Victoria from the estate. The second was to his head of security, requesting that every archived audio file from the past 3 months be backed up to a secure external server that Victoria could never access or delete. Then, Dominic Ashford stood up, adjusted his shirt, and walked downstairs to have dinner with his fiancée, as if absolutely nothing had happened. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in deception, but this time, Dominic was the one performing. He sat across from Victoria at the long dining table, cutting into his steak with the same calm precision he used to dissect billion-dollar deals. Victoria was radiant, wearing a silk dress that cost more than Elena earned in 3 months, talking animatedly about the wedding venue options she had narrowed down. "I am thinking the Rosecliff Estate in Newport," Victoria said, swirling her wine glass elegantly. "It is absolutely stunning, and it seats 300 comfortably. My mother says it is the only venue worthy of an Ashford wedding." "That sounds wonderful," Dominic replied, his voice warm and perfectly measured, not a single crack, not a single hint of what was brewing beneath the surface. Victoria smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I knew you would love it. Oh, and I was thinking after the wedding, maybe we could let go of some of the older staff and bring in a new team. You know, a fresh start for our new chapter together." "Which staff members did you have in mind?" Dominic asked casually, though he already knew the answer. "Well," Victoria said, leaning back with a dismissive wave of her hand, "Elena, for one. She is just not up to standard, Dominic. I have tried to be patient with her, but she is lazy, she is careless, and honestly, I do not trust her around our belongings. I would not be surprised if things started going missing. There it was, the setup, the exact same threat she had made to Elena's face just hours ago, now being planted softly into Dominic's ear as a suggestion. She was laying the groundwork to have Elena fired, or worse, accused of theft. It was calculated, deliberate, and deeply sinister. Dominic took a slow sip of his water. I will think about it, he said simply. Victoria beamed, interpreting his neutrality as agreement. She had no idea that her fiancé was cataloging every word she spoke, filing it away as additional evidence in a case that was already devastating. After dinner, Dominic excused himself to his study. He sat in the leather chair, staring at the dark window, and thought carefully about the next 48 hours. He did not want to simply confront Victoria. Confrontation would give her the chance to cry, manipulate, and twist the narrative in her favor. He had watched her do it before with friends and family, turning every situation into one where she was the victim. No, Dominic needed Victoria to expose herself. He needed her to commit to her cruelty so completely and so publicly that there would be no room for denial, no space for excuses, and absolutely no possibility of escape. 2 days later, Dominic set his plan into motion. He announced to Victoria that he was hosting a small, intimate gathering at the estate that Friday evening. Nothing extravagant, just a handful of close friends and 2 of his most trusted business partners. Victoria was thrilled. She loved playing the role of the perfect hostess in front of Dominic's elite circle. It gave her a stage, an audience, and a chance to perform the version of herself she wanted the world to see. What Victoria did not know was that Dominic had arranged something else entirely. He had quietly asked his head of security to wire the main living room, the kitchen, and the West Wing corridor with discreet wireless microphones connected to a portable speaker system hidden inside his study. Every word spoken in those areas would be transmitted live to a receiver that Dominic could activate at any moment during the evening. He also did something unexpected. He personally visited Elena that Thursday morning in the staff break room. Elena was sitting alone, eating a small sandwich, when Dominic walked in. She immediately stood up, startled. "Senor Ashford, I am sorry. I did not expect you. Is everything all right?" Elena asked nervously, instinctively tucking her sandwich behind her back as if ashamed of it. Dominic pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Sit down, Elena. Please." Elena hesitated, then slowly sat back down. She had never been alone in a room with Dominic before. He had always been kind to her, but distant, the way most billionaires were with their household staff. "I need to ask you something," Dominic said, his voice low and steady. "And I need you to be completely honest with me. Has anyone in this house ever treated you in a way that made you feel unsafe or disrespected?" Elena's face went pale. Her eyes dropped immediately to the table. Her fingers began twisting the corner of her napkin in tight, anxious circles. "Everything is fine, sir," she whispered, the rehearsed answer falling from her lips like a reflex. "Elena," Dominic said gently, leaning forward, "I already know the answer. I am not asking to test you. I am asking because I want to fix it." Elena looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and fragile, terrified hope. For 10 months, she had endured Victoria's cruelty in complete silence, believing that no one would ever care enough to ask. And now, the most powerful man in the house was sitting across from her, looking her directly in the eyes, and telling her that he already knew. Her chin trembled. A single tear slid down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. "I cannot lose this job, sir," Elena whispered. "My brother needs me." Dominic reached across the table and placed his hand gently over Elena's trembling fingers. "You are not going to lose your job, Elena. I give you my word. No one is going to hurt you in this house ever again." Elena broke. The wall she had carefully built around herself for 10 months crumbled in an instant. She pressed her free hand against her mouth, trying to muffle the sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for every cruel word Victoria had whispered in her ear. She cried for every night she had gone home and stared at the ceiling, wondering if she was really as worthless as that woman said she was. She cried for her brother, who had no idea what his sister was enduring just to keep him alive. Dominic sat quietly and let her cry. He did not rush her. He did not offer empty words. He simply waited until she was ready. When Elena finally composed herself, she told him everything. She told him about the blistered hands from re-ironing perfectly pressed clothes. She told him about the coffee thrown across the kitchen floor. She told him about her lunch being dumped in the trash. She told him about the night Victoria called her into the master bedroom at midnight just to reorganize an entire shelf of handbags that were already in perfect order, then laughed when Elena's hands cramped so badly she could barely close her fingers. Dominic listened to every word without interruption. When Elena finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "Thank you for telling me, Elena," Dominic said finally. "I need you to trust me for the next 48 hours. Can you do that?" Elena nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "Good. On Friday evening, I am hosting a small dinner here at the estate. I want you to work the event as you normally would. Serve drinks, clear plates, be present in the room. Victoria will likely say something to you at some point during the evening. When she does, I need you to do exactly what you have always done. Stay calm. Stay quiet. Do not react. Can you do that for me?" Elena swallowed hard. The thought of being in a room with Victoria while guests were present terrified her. But something in Dominic's steady gaze gave her a strength she had not felt in months. "I can do that, sir," Elena said quietly. "One more thing," Dominic added, standing up from the chair. "After Friday, everything changes. I promise you that." He walked out of the break room, leaving Elena sitting alone with her half-finished sandwich and a fragile but growing sense that, for the first time in a very long time, someone powerful was standing on her side. Friday evening arrived like a storm gathering on the horizon. The Ashford estate was immaculate. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier light. Fresh flowers lined the hallways. Soft jazz played through invisible speakers embedded in the ceiling. Victoria had spent the entire afternoon preparing herself, emerging from the master suite in a stunning black gown. Her hair swept into an elegant updo, every detail designed to project the image of a refined, gracious woman. The guests arrived at 7. There were 6 of them, a carefully selected group that included Dominic's longtime business partner Richard, his wife Catherine, a respected family attorney named Harold, and 3 close friends who had known Dominic for over a decade. Victoria greeted each of them at the door with warm embraces and a dazzling smile. She was charming, poised, and utterly convincing. Elena moved quietly through the room in her black uniform, offering champagne flutes and small appetizers on silver trays. She kept her eyes low and her movements careful. Every time she passed Victoria, her pulse quickened, but she kept her composure exactly as Dominic had asked. The evening progressed smoothly through cocktails and into dinner. Victoria commanded the table conversation effortlessly, telling stories about wedding preparations and future travel plans. She was performing flawlessly, and she knew it. It happened just after dessert. Elena was clearing the plates from the table when she accidentally bumped the edge of Victoria's wine glass with the serving tray. The glass wobbled but did not fall. Not a single drop spilled. It was the smallest, most insignificant contact imaginable. But it was enough. Victoria's mask slipped. Her eyes snapped toward Elena with a flash of raw, undisguised contempt. "Watch what you are doing, you clumsy little nobody," she hissed under her breath, just loud enough for the people nearest to her to hear. The table went quiet. Catherine looked uncomfortable. Richard glanced at Dominic. Elena froze, her fingers tightening around the tray. "I am so sorry, ma'am," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sorry does not fix stupidity," Victoria muttered, adjusting her glass with an exaggerated sigh. "Honestly, Dominic, I do not understand why you keep her around. She is absolutely worthless." There it was. The word. The exact same word she had used in the corridor that Tuesday evening. Worthless. Spoken casually, effortlessly, as if it were simply a fact of life. As if calling another human being worthless was as natural as breathing. Dominic set down his napkin slowly. He looked at Victoria with an expression that made the entire table fall into complete silence. Then he pushed his chair back and stood up. "Since we are being honest tonight," Dominic said, his voice dangerously calm, "I think everyone at this table deserves to hear who Victoria Langston really is." Victoria's smile vanished. Her eyes darted toward Dominic with a flicker of panic she could not hide. "Dominic, what are you talking about? You are embarrassing me in front of our friends." "No, Victoria," Dominic replied, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out his phone. "You embarrassed yourself. I just recorded it." He tapped the screen and placed the phone face up on the dining table. The archived audio from Tuesday evening filled the room. Victoria's own voice echoed off the chandelier-lit walls, clear and unmistakable. "You are nothing, Elena. You are worthless. You smell like poverty. I will tell Dominic you have been stealing from us." Every guest at the table sat frozen. Catherine covered her mouth with both hands. Richard stared at the phone in disbelief. Harold, the attorney, shook his head slowly, his expression shifting from shock to quiet disgust. Victoria lunged for the phone. "Turn it off. Dominic, turn it off right now." Dominic pulled the phone away calmly. "There are 47 recordings, Victoria. 47. 3 months of you psychologically torturing a 26-year-old woman who never once fought back because she was too afraid of losing the income that keeps her dying brother alive." Tears streamed down Victoria's face, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of humiliation. She looked around the table desperately, searching for a single sympathetic face. She found none. "The engagement is over," Dominic said, his voice carrying the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. "My attorney has already prepared the paperwork. You will vacate this property by tomorrow morning. If you attempt to contact Elena, harass any member of my staff, or twist this story publicly, every recording will be released to every media outlet in the country." Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came. She stood up from her chair, trembling violently, and walked out of the dining room without looking back. The front door closed behind her for the last time. Dominic turned to Elena, who was standing near the doorway, clutching the serving tray against her chest, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. He walked over to her and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. "You are not worthless, Elena. You never were. Starting Monday, you are getting a raise, full medical coverage for your brother, and a formal apology from this household. You have earned every bit of it." Elena could not speak. She simply nodded, pressing her hand against her heart. True character is never measured by how you treat the people above you. It is measured by how you treat the people who cannot fight back. Victoria had everything and chose cruelty. Elena had nothing and chose dignity. And in the end, dignity won. If this story made your heart race and brought tears to your eyes, smash that like button and share this video with someone who believes the truth always wins. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done if you were in Dominic's position? We read every single comment. Until next time, stay kind, stay honest, and remember, the truth always comes out.